Hello and welcome to web designing program using HTML on Siba Learning Zone. Today we are going to learn something about HTML attributes. HTML attributes. What does HTML attribute does in web designing? HTML attributes provide additional information about HTML elements. It provides additional information about HTML elements. Now let's look at this example as we've done that in our previous lesson on how to add a color to a text using the font tag. So with the font tag, you could see that we have the font tag and then an attribute known as color. So in this case, the color becomes what we call the attribute. Now about HTML attributes. It said all HTML elements have attributes, and attributes provide additional information about an element. A typical example is this. Looking at the font has an attribute of color, which is red, meaning that the attribute has added an additional information to the font tag, giving the text here, that is convention, the color red in the HTML web page. The third one, it says attributes are always specified in the start tag. So on the previous one, you could see that all attributes are always located in the front or the opening tag of HTML. And lastly, attributes usually come in name or value pairs, like name equals value. Now let's move forward to see how this is properly explained. Typical example is of that of the image tag. It says HTML images are defined with the tag img. So the file name of the source, that is the attribute, is src, and the size of the image, also an attribute called the width and height, all are provided as attributes. So you can see that the image tag has the attribute of the src, the width, and then the height. Now, let's explain further. Explaining further with the example given here, we could see that we have, first of all, the tag. And like I said earlier, the attribute is always in the opening tag. The closing tag can never have an attribute. And within the opening tag, we have the attribute and the value. We have something we call the value. The value is the name that you give to the attribute in terms of Now let's explain things more further. With the first example given, you see we have the tag, we have an attribute, and we also have a value. And like I said earlier, attributes are always found in the opening tag. Attributes cannot be added to a closing tag. And alongside the attribute, we have what we call a value. And what the value does is it gives a name or a figure of what the attribute is. So looking below the image tag here, you could see that we have the image tag with an attribute src, giving you the image that it wants. That is w3schools.jpg. So this explains a value. Let's look at the other one, the width. The width is also an attribute which has been given its value as 104. So attribute and its value goes hand in hand. It depends on the kind of attribute that you are using for you to give your value, the desired value. Meaning you can use 104 value for the attribute src because it needs a picture, not a figure. The next tag below it is the a tag, and you can see that the a tag also have an attribute known as the href, and href demands a link. That's what I said. The values of each attribute depends on how the value or the attribute wants it. If it's a figure, it should be given in figures. But if it's a link, it should also be given as a link. If it's a picture, it should also be given in a picture form. Note this, using quotes are the most common. Omitting quotes can produce errors, meaning that every value that you give for an attribute must be in quotation marks. Just as you see for the src, you see that it's in quotes. The width value is also in quotes. The height value also in quotes. And with the href, that's the link, you could see that the link is also in quotes. So never forget to bring quotes when giving up your value.